We're here in the Philadelphia Museum of Art looking at a large portable fresco by Diego Rivera called Sugarcane, constructed and painted in 1931. It showcases a scene in Mexico on a sugar plantation. This weighs roughly 1,000 pounds because it uses an ancient tradition of fresco. Diego Rivera became world famous as a modern artist who brought back a tradition of wall painting that had roots in both Italian Renaissance fresco painting and in ancient Mexican wall painting. Diego Rivera was a precious artist. He joined the oldest academy of art in the Americas as a teenager. He was given a fellowship in order to travel to Europe, and he spent 14 years in Europe amongst modernists like Picasso. Because he was in Europe, he missed the most violent point of the Mexican Revolution between 1910 and 1920. In 1920, Álvaro Obregón was elected president. He recognized that the visual arts could be very, very important for communicating the messages of the revolution to very wide swaths of the citizenry in Mexico. Rivera was in Paris, and then the new government in Mexico sent him to Italy to study Italian Renaissance fresco painting. And when he was called back to Mexico to become one of the founders to what we call the Mexican Muralist School. Rivera was one of the three great ones, which included Sequenos, Orozco, and Rivera. This was truly public art, in both terms of technique and in terms of imagery. Rivera spent the 1920s executing a set of titanic fresco commissions around Mexico for government and other kinds of public institutions, which stand for the revolution and the nation. But ultimately, the president was assassinated, and funding for this art began to dry up. Rivera looks north for new patronage, so he looks for the United States. In the States in the 1920s and 30s, there is a great voyage for Mexican culture. The Museum of Modern Art decides that it's going to devote its second ever one artist exhibition, the first one being to Matisse, this one being to Diego Rivera, which is an index of exactly how prestigious and famous Diego Rivera was in New York at the time. Diego did have opportunities to produce murals in San Francisco, in the brand new Rockefeller Center, and then ultimately in Detroit as well. At the Museum of Modern Art, his problem was the work from which he was not well known was immovable and architectural, and so he needed to invent a new hybrid kind of painting, which we call portable murals. Which are large-scale pictures on reinforced concrete with true fresco surfaces. A series of finer layers of plaster would be applied. It's said that he worked for 15 hours a day with 3 assistants in order to produce the first 5. Those 5 would get a kind of historical cycle of the struggle of Mexican people against their oppressors from the time of the Spanish conquest in the 1500s to modern times. Sugarcane is a representation of the inequality that promoted the revolution itself. It's really a picture of race and class in the social system of an hacienda or a plantation. These were enormous land holdings that were managed by small armies or laborers that were in almost every respect except legal slavery. So in the foreground, you have relatively a beige image of an indigenous woman, and you can tell she's indigenous because of the dark color of her skin and the way her hair is braided. Also, the white clothing that she wears. Together with her children, a boy and a girl, they haul baskets that she's holding papaya, that she's also cutting papaya from a tree. And one of the pillars of an official Mexican policy and the great themes of Mexican mural painting by Rivera and others were a celebration of indigenous people as a link of the foundational ancient cultures that preceded the Spanish conquest. So it's really a framing device. And as you look back, there's quite a strong contrast to the laborers, their bodies boned by the heavy by the heavy bundles of cut sugar cane, which they have pulled together with ropes. Then you have a blonde light skin, therefore can be seen as like the overseer. He's carrying a gun, he's pointing a whip in the direction of these workers. Your eye zigzags to the background to find another army man who is sitting, but he's also on a hammock. So you can see that he's guarding, but he's also the plantation owner. He is most likely a European, but more importantly, he's a person who's lying in the hammock with guard dogs for good measure protecting him on the veranda of the plantation house, and is such contrast to the sense of purpose of the more innocent figure in the foreground. This can be seen as a redo of the theme that Rivera had already painted in a mural in the Palace of Cuernavaca, but that rendering doesn't have the foreground. If we continue to the background, we see three workers standing right above the bottoms of already stalks of cane, continuing the cutting. So you have also the sugar cane cultivation part of the sugar industry. Sugar was one of the most cultivated crops that could be grown, but sugar is a labor-intensive crop, and it requires the exploitation of indigenous labor. Rivera was a Marxist, but Mexico's primary agrarian economy, even in its time, rather than an industrial one. So what he's doing is he's taking the Marxist idea out of class struggle, and he's showing how it plays out in an agrarian frame with a radical dynamic. What's so fascinating is that this painting that was made in an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, founded by one of Rockefeller's, and so you have this clash between the ideology and the capitalism in the ideology of Marx. Rivera was an extremely politically self-aware artist, and you knew very well that he knew there was hazards in painting painting for patrons as well as wealthy Americans. But he also knew that he could do some good as a kind of cultural and political ambassador for Mexico. It was felt by Rivera and by many of his colleagues that a realist style was the best because it would be widely appealed by the broad public. Rivera was making political propaganda, but of course, when he was in the U.S., what he received was a little bit different. As complex as this panel is, it's just one of the series in the museum in Philadelphia. It's directly across an even more brutal painting. Rivera executed 5 portable murals tracing from the Aztec to modern times. The U.S. audiences were very struck by Rivera's ability to tell historical stones in a way that brought out their tragedy and their grandeur, and especially their complexity and ambiguity.